those documents in my testimony. If you want to have them both ready, that'd be great.
So good morning.
Good morning.
Now, we have had several false starts getting Ed Larson into the committee to speak on H-126. And here he is today. So I'm not sure if you know all of us, Ed.
I do. I've been here before, and I have heard you before at one
Thank you for the reminder.
Probably. I apologize for these spits and starts to get me in here.
Well, I think our schedule was not, we weren't able to stick collectively to our schedule. So why don't we turn it over and have you jump right in?
Okay, well, I'm Ed Larson. I'm a lobbyist for the Vermont Forest Products Association. And I want to begin by saying thank you. Thank you very much for taking on this bill and reviewing it. This is extremely important for us that you're doing this, and we really appreciate it. I know you don't have ownership of the bill. We think it would have been more appropriate that you had, but that again, we're not in charge of the process. We're just here doing what we can. I did provide testimony to the Environment and Energy Committee a few weeks back, and that is what I sent to Allura, so that's on your website. I'll refer to it a little bit, but I really want to kind of get right into the meat of the issue of what we're concerned with and try to see if there's some ways we can find some common ground. I spoke opposed to this bill. I also spoke opposed to the sister bill that was in play last year, H-606, mostly because we don't understand the impacts this could have on our industry. And our industry is very concerned about our future. That is why you last year voted to and supported a Forest Futures Roadmap process, which we're in the throes of right now. And we really are trying to figure out what our future is and how we can get there. And when we see legislation like this, we're constantly having to kind of readjust our thinking, if you will. You heard from a lot of folks, mostly folks that are practitioners, hands-on, working on the land. And I thank you for that. All of them have expressed very similar concerns to my testimony. You have heard from both agriculture and forestry with the same concerns. These are your constituents. They are more comfortable coming to this committee to express those concerns. Quite frankly, we don't feel we get the same listening opportunity in other committees. So I really am thankful that you're willing to take the time and really understand what our concerns are to do this. Sam Lincoln has been reaching out and has taken a leadership role, and I really thank him for that. The Vermont Woodlands Association, Alan Thompson was in Friday with Sam. I thought they delivered some very good comments. I think that Alan was very articulate in explaining that this is not a bill that's going to increase carbon storage. We do that very well in working forests, and I think he articulated it very well. My testimony to the Environment and Energy Committee was along the same lines. I was trying to educate them about forest succession and silviculture and how all that plays a role in carbon and carbon storage. And I'm happy to walk you through that, but it's not an easy thing to sell or to explain. I am an adjunct down at Vermont Tech, and I actually teach silviculture, and it takes 16 weeks to get a real good handle on how forest responds to disturbances. But there are natural disturbances and there are disturbances that humans create, which are also natural in some ways, but are meant to mimic natural disturbances. And the beauty of it is we can do what nature does and do it very well. It may sound arrogant, but what we can do better than nature is time it. Right? Okay, nature doesn't have always the best timing. A windstorm could come through and just destroy your forest 10 years before you were really thinking about thinning it out, and you've lost all that. So, but if we had that opportunity to thin it out, that forest would be more resilient to the next wind event, as well as we would have an economy that's being supported by our silvicultural interactions with the forest. We're proud of that ethic. We're proud of being stewards of the land. You heard it from the farming community and you're hearing it from us. We feel we're doing a darn good job. This bill kind of unsettles that thought. And we'd like to support it. We'd like to support conservation. We are conservationists, but we're seeing a whole new definition of conservation that kind of is unsettling to us. And we want to figure out how we can get on board, be at the table when we're trying to step up our activity. Now, you also heard from Trey Martin from the Housing Conservation Board. And unfortunately, I missed half his testimony. I was in the hospital with my wife. I was listening there. I had to leave. I came home and had no internet. It was strange. I have never, ever seen a widespread internet crash like that. I mean, it was all over the place. Alan over in Waterbury didn't have it. I didn't have it. We couldn't operate. So I couldn't hear the rest of it. But I did hear a few things. And he did say that this bill is over and above the conservation efforts that are currently taking place. And we're pretty darn proud of the conservation efforts that are currently taking place. Okay. He also added that Vermont is way ahead of other states and probably all jurisdictions worldwide. Okay. We should be proud of that too. Okay. But why are we upsetting the cart here? Why are you having the practitioners all up in arms to try to step it up when, you know, I'm not saying we're going to rest on our morals, but, you know, this is a little hard. So we want to try to do it. This committee could help us. This committee can help us with some amendments that could help at least make us at least be more comfortable with it, more palatable. You could even step it up there. Maybe we could even live with it or even support it. I don't think you're going to get in widespread buy-in from all of us, but you could get some buy-in. And we think that the amendments that Sam and Alan and I, with Sam's leadership, have worked on are very reasonable, would be accepted by the other committee and perhaps even the other chamber if we put it together in a very intelligent way. And I really urge you to look at what I'm going to present to you with Sam here by my side to answer any questions if anything was to come up. The definitions that are used in here for the new area type of areas, the biodiversity conservation areas, ecological reserve areas, they're hard definitions. In other words, they can't change without another act of legislature. This became law. One of our things is that we really would like to participate more in that conversation among stakeholders as to what these definitions really should be and what they should say. So we are asking for flexibility there. Okay. Okay. You want to have categories? Okay. But let us figure out what they should have in there and wordsmith it with alongside the legislative bodies. So give us a directive, but make it flexible. Makes sense to us. It's reasonable. You know, give us an opportunity to debate amongst ourselves and make some changes if it's appropriate. And then, you know, if the legislature looks at it and says, well, we disagree, we want to look at it again, fine, it's your prerogative, but at least give us a chance. The use of Vermont conservation design. I know that this committee has not had a real deep dive into that document. Neither has Vermonters. This document has not gone through any vetting process with the public at all. Half of Vermont doesn't even know it exists. It has been used as an internal document by the Fish and Wildlife Department for only a few years now, I think maybe a decade. And it's been going through some modifications and changes. I know the authors, and I have a deep respect for the authors. I like them. I actually like the document. Many of my colleagues use that document for some of the planning that they do on private land. It's a good document. But they have asked, the department has asked, ANR has asked that it not be used as a tool for regulating our activities, that it is really a working document to help provide guidance to the department in their work. I would like to see it, personally, I'd like to see it totally taken out of the bill. I don't think that's accomplishment bill. I'm not going to make it a big fight over that. I'm not going to die on a sword over removing conservation by design. But if we're going to use it, it should be more balanced. Okay. In there, they talk about how they want 9% of Vermont's forest land to be old growth forests. We're going to get there. Alan Thompson told you that. If we do nothing, we're going to get there. Well over 10% of Vermont is going to be old growth forest in another 100 years. The beauty of it is we'll be managing it. Mm-hmm. Okay. No problem managing forest and old growth. I could deal with a stand of timber that is 250 years old, okay? And still create opportunities for new growth to keep it healthy, keep it vibrant, and have an economy that is dependent on that land. But if we just set it aside and do nothing with it and let just whatever happens to it happens, we're left out of the picture, okay? And we really disagree with that. So we're looking to try to keep ourselves at the table on this. So if it's going to say 10%, and I don't see it in the bill. I don't see a bill saying we're going to have a set a goal of 10% of old growth or 10% in the ecological reserve category, which is basically like a forever wild category where we do nothing to it, just let it go. There should be something that says, what about the 0 to 15-year class of forest, the early successional forest? Because we need that forest for our future. And it needs to happen every 20 years where we get another 10% or 15% of Vermont in that category, so that as time goes on, there's always going to be this inventory rotating to be available for the industry, be available for our wildlife, and to keep Vermont healthy and vibrant. That's all about succession. That's all about how we can, in silviculture, work with that. Okay. So if you're going to allow for targets, it should be balanced. And, Vermont Conservation by Design is close to being balanced, but there are some things that we have been advocating for in there to change. And that's one of them, early successional habitats. I don't need to take up a whole lot more time. I want to get right to the recommendations. There are found in Sam's letter, and it's the end of his letter where it said recommendations for amendments to that. I could stop now if there are any questions about our concerns before we get into this.
Sure, yeah. Just on, well, a couple things, and I probably ought to have said this at the start. I think that there is an event at noon across the street that I think a number of committee members are probably going to feel they need to be more or less on time to. So just, I don't want everyone to stand up en masse and you wonder why. Just to the last point, and I think we heard some numbers yesterday, and there may have been some confusion. There isn't anything in the bill right now that says 9% or 10%.
I didn't see it. It wasn't there in the original versions.
Right, okay.
It's not in play now.
Other committee questions? Yes, Representative Tupperman.
So I want to pose this idea and tell me if it sounds familiar. There seems to be a paradigm issue. So you're talking about this bill being a new contrived way of seeing things, but actually it speaks to an older way of seeing things where human interaction with the land is always seen as negative, and then the absence of human interaction is always seen as positive. And it seems kind of a throwback to that paradigm. Whereas I think what you're presenting is a paradigm that human interaction can be negative or positive, depending on how we fulfill those methods. Mm-hmm. And in fact, you're maybe even saying that doing nothing is more detrimental than doing something positive.
Yes.
Right?
That's a very well taken statement. I think that does articulate how we're viewing this.
Right.
As a way of removing the human element from the good work we've been doing.
I mean, there is that 10% that has been removed. However, the idea that if that were in there, that there would be 10% of our forest lands just left to sit there, knowing what that looks like, being familiar with the forest, I know that forest untouched is often in detrimental state.
Right. Trees crowd. Mm-hmm. When they get crowded, their growth rates are stunted. They're susceptible to attack by insects. They're susceptible to wind. Their whole body is weakened. So wind throw, forest fires could be more devastating because there's so much timber out there. There's a lot of things that you have to think about that could happen to a forest when there's no interaction with practitioners. So you're right. I think that you're on what we're trying to get to. And we're not saying, absolutely no acres of old growth, untouched wilderness. We've got a lot of it now. You look across the lake and there's a couple 100,000 of acres of wilderness. We've got some in the Northeast Kingdom. We've got some down in the Green Mountain National Forest. Conti seems to be going in that direction as well up in the Northeast Kingdom. So there are plenty and plenty of opportunities for research to be done on how our forests behave without our interaction with it. But we're hanging on to all we can, that bundle of the timber resource, okay? Our industry, pretty smart folks out there running their businesses. We're being forced to right-size our businesses to the available timber source, okay? So that's a big challenge, and that in time you could see some fairly dire impacts from that. We need a viable forest products industry if we want to keep Vermont forested, if we want to keep our forest healthy. So this is what our amendments kind of get to. It puts us at the table. First amendment that is offered here is the conservation category definitions shall be draft language, not hard definitions. Again, let the panel that this is speaking to create, okay? Let them look at those words. Let them debate and decide whether that definition is appropriate or whether a modification should occur. I think that's a very appropriate thing to be asking that group to do. So please don't let it be a hard number or a hard definition. And there are, you could put easy language in there to just say that the legislative body envisions a definition, something like this, and then put in there that the panel, I forget what they're calling it, the working group will take a look at that and come back with new language if it deems appropriate, something along those lines. The next one, eligibility of conservation categories. This would help us a lot. This is where you could get our buy-in, okay? If we knew what kind of land, what kind of forest would be eligible for any one of these categories. In other words, let's front load the process a little bit. Give us more information, give us more surety that we know what it is. And one example is last year when the legislature created a new category in the current use program called the forest reserve category. It is intended to be a category where there is very little human interaction. And it is meant to bring that forest into an old growth situation. But in order to be eligible to be in that category, that land must already demonstrate old growth characteristics, okay? So if we had land that if we were to say in this bill that in order to be eligible to be in the reserve forest land category or be in the, I keep forgetting this, ecological significant, no. All right, I have to go back to the beginning. The first
Ecological reserve area.
thank you. The ecological reserve area, which is meant to be the no touch forever wild one. That if it had some kind of criteria in law that says it must meet certain old growth characteristics before it's eligible to go into this category, we would understand that. That would make sense. We would know exactly where you're going because at this point it's pretty vague. We don't know what land could go in there. And all of a sudden land that would be absolutely very suitable for management, for working forests that could provide high quality timber for our economy. All of a sudden it's thrown in there and we lose that. That's what we're fearing. But if it was already a piece of land that perhaps we're not even working on now, or we have done enough that it's now in a situation where it could go into that category, at least we would understand that. So some language that would set up criteria up front in law. I bounced this off VNRC a couple weeks ago, looking for front loading. They understand what we're doing. They understand that. Maybe they could be helpful in that area. They really want us to buy into this, okay? You want us to buy into this. The whole body wants us all to kind of come together on this. And we're not there yet, but we might be able to get there with some of these changes. Third one, working lands impact analysis. That body that ANR is creating and the work of the ANR itself to create the plan should come back with some additional reports on impact. For example, the total acreage that may be needed, or be taken out of active forest management or agriculture production to meet those two categories up front. I think it's implied that that will happen, but we should say it. It should be right there. It should be right front and center. That should be something that we want to see. Resulting reduction in revenue for forest landowners on an annual basis. What is the economic impact that this could have on our industry? There are some pretty smart economists in both departments of Fish and Wildlife and Forest and Parks, as well as in Commerce. And they can get their heads together and come up with some pretty good ideas of what these things can do to us. We'd like to see that. We'd like to understand that. Please put that in so that you can ask them to give us that information. The impact of viability on the forest economy in Vermont and the region. I know that Trey Martin said that Vermont is way ahead of other states. Other states around us are not doing too bad either. We work very well with New Hampshire, Maine, New York, on a lot of activities. The four-state region, the Northern Forest region, we do a lot of work together. I coordinate for SFI, the Sustainable Forestry Initiative. I work closely with the other 4 states and Pennsylvania and Massachusetts on a bunch of topics, a bunch of issues about forest safety, safety with loggers, about silviculture, about climate-smart forestry, all these new things that we're dealing with. How do we protect water quality as well as water quantity? Okay, these are all things that we're working on a regional level. Okay, if we get kind of changed, then we're no longer that same partner we have been. We all work together, and that's kind of what I'm trying to get to on that. So understanding the impact on our whole region would tell us a lot too. Total acreage and target areas that is enrolled in the Vermont Use Value Appraisal Program. In other words, woodland that goes into the reserve forest land category all of a sudden be shifted into this new ecological reserve area. If so, what does that mean to taxation? What does that mean to that landowner? And right now, if I enrolled my land in that reserve category, 10 years down the line, I can unenroll it and put it back into just working forests. I have that flexibility. And we should always have that flexibility. That could be lost when it gets shifted into that. So I would love to be part of a conversation with those leaders in A&R about that, find out what they're thinking, what that means, so that we can come back with a report on that. And the next one is how it ties into that Forest Futures Strategic Roadmap. I don't think we had enough time to really flush that out among us. So I'm asking for you to kind of really contemplate what that means. How do we interact with the industry is trying to figure out its future? How do we make the connection so that we understand how pressure here changes opportunity here and vice versa? Sam may have more to add to that because we really haven't had a chance to flush that out in a meaningful way for language in a bill. But we should be cognizant that the industry is trying to figure out its future. And this bill has influence. What is that influence? How do we struggle with that? I think I'm getting to most of what we were thinking in the beginning, but we're not 100% on that one yet. Another day or two, we probably could be, but we're close to that. So I didn't take you away from your lunch.
You did.
Unless you have a lot of questions.
Well, that remains to be seen. Who does have questions? I want to try and, okay, Representative Lipsky.
Thank you very much, Ed. Because we've got about 6 minutes left, I'd love to hear from Sam Lincoln if he'd share the chair with you about any other insights you might have that could help us move towards some of these amendments.
Sure.
If that's all right.
Come on up, Sam.
Thank you. For the record, Sam Lincoln. I just would ask in this short period of time, if you have questions, happy to answer them. I don't want to repeat anything that Ed said, but I ask you to give consideration to this, that again, speaking from the forest economy, that we're not looking to stop conservation. We're not looking to be detrimental to this bill in any way, be additive to it, be helpful. And, oh, I'm sorry. And ask for your support and consideration in that and finding a path forward. If it's amendments to our suggested amendments, we want to work to find common ground in this in a way that works for rural Vermont and satisfies a lot of other folks that aren't landowners in rural Vermont, that they're concerned about this too, and we want to work together. So thank you for your consideration. I'll take any questions as well.
I just want to be clear again on, so I'm looking at the language that was in the document that Sam had sent. And in terms of describing the total acreage, so it's the third item that's highlighted, the working lands impact analysis, and the total area, total acreage that might be needed, ecological reserve area and biodiversity conservation area targets. Again, just to be clear, right now there aren't any there are no new numerical targets, as far as I know, in the draft of the bill that is currently in play. So trying to nail down a number of acres would be difficult without a numerical figure in the bill.
Yeah, so if I may, the bill did have target percentages of Vermont's acreage that it wanted, and that was removed at the end. Vermont Conservation Design does have acreage goals in it in different regions of the state. And for young forest, old forest, things like that, as I mentioned in that bill, the young forest category is not even contemplated in there, and I don't know why. And so this brings some certainty that this planning process, bringing Fish and Wildlife to the table and saying, all right, how many acres are out there that you need to meet this type of forest condition that you'd like to see achieved? How many of those acres are currently in current use? How many of them meet the definition of those categories that are already in place for special areas, if you will, that might be appropriate for this level of conservation? So it puts a little finer point on looking into that, asking the experts, the developers of that document, working with the stakeholders to have an understanding of what that looks like. That's our intent with that.
And not only do we want to see that, but we think you want to see that too. Mm-hmm. So we urge you to ask for it.
Okay, well, thank you. And as seems to be the case nearly every time, we have to cut things short. But we appreciate this and appreciate the time that you've put into it. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Because we still have a minute, I'd like to make Chairman Durfee.
I'm going to cut it off here just because we're supposed to be across the street at 12. I need to go.
Okay.
But